So today I want to show you how I used Python to grab data directly from my Garmin Connect and put that data into a Notion template here to build this Garmin dashboard. So yeah, I did this partially because I want to keep all of my fitness data in one place within Notion where I keep all of my other like notes and task managers and stuff, but also because the actual Garmin Connect dashboard, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of data, and that's one of the great things about Garmin is that it captures so much data, but a lot of this is, just more data than I want to be seeing every day. And there's more than this for every activity. There's like a ton of data. So basically I just wanted to capture the important stuff that I want to see every day from Garmin Connect and put it into Notion. So yeah, in this chart, some of the data I'm grabbing, I'm getting my daily mileage and VO2 max. I'm plotting that. And then over here, I'm getting, so each activity, when you finish an activity in Garmin, it classifies it as either like aerobic base, VO2 max, threshold, and there's a few others. But basically, I just wanted to see sort of the balance between some of the faster stuff and slower aerobic base work that I'm doing. And yeah, so this is the database. Python is grabbing data from Garmin Connect and pushing it into this database. And then down here, this is directly from Garmin Connect, my 1K mile, 5K, 10K, and half marathon records. So yeah, Python is grabbing the data from Garmin Connect, pushing it into this database, and then I'm using rows to plot the data from this database. It seems like Notion right now does not have chart capabilities directly within Notion, but rows is a great option to plot the data in your databases and make some pretty data visualization stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna walk through how to build this. I know there's a lot of people who use both Garmin and Notion, so hopefully some people will find this useful. So yeah, let's get into it. To pull data from Garmin Connect into Python, I'm using this Garmin Connect library by CyberJunkie, and there's a ton of contributors to this too. But yeah, this is a very good library with very good documentation. I definitely recommend checking this out. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of data that I'm not going to be using in this project, which someone definitely could find useful to have within Notion. Definitely like total steps or total calories or something. I can see that being really useful. So yeah, definitely check this out. Really great library. But yeah, let's get started with using this in VS Code. In VS Code, I just got started by making this folder that I called Garmin Demo within my desktop. And first I'm going to make a new file here called garmindemo.py. And now let's make sure first I'm using Python 3.11. I couldn't get it to work in Python 3.12. So if you're having trouble with that, try changing your version to 3.11. But yeah, once you have that, let's start installing our requirements. Pip install Garmin Connect. And then also pip install Garth. So I'm just doing this globally, but obviously you can do this in a virtual environment if you want. But for the purposes of this, keeping it simple, I just wanted to do this. Cool. So this is just copy and pasted from the reference IPy notebook, but just going to see if we can connect to my Garmin Connect. So saving this and running it, I'll enter my email and my password associated with my Garmin Connect account. And then this might take a second. Okay, cool. So it looks like we are connected. So now we can start actually getting the data we're interested in. So yeah, still just copy pasting from their reference notebook. So they're using Garth to save the session. And then, yeah, so this is all just copy pasted from the reference, but I'm going to move all of the imports there together, just like a syntax thing, but yeah, cool. And then instead of calling this yesterday, I'm just going to call it today. I haven't run yet today, So I want to get my data associated with yesterday, but just gonna call it today. So yeah, cool. So this will allow us to access data from our Garmin that's associated with today. We can delete this, and yeah, let's start accessing some data. So the Garmin Connect, the way it formats data is a little bit confusing. Definitely play around with the reference notebook that is in that GitHub that I showed you. That'll help you figure out which methods you want to use, which dictionaries, like how to access this data that you want to access. But yeah, so for me, I'm just getting my last run using this getLastActivity method, and getting the value associated with the split summaries. And then I'm getting my stats using this getMaxMetrics method, my today's stats. So yeah, that's going to allow me to access the actual data that I want to be pushing into Notion. So that's going to be this VO2 max, miles, effect, and duration. So yeah, from my today's stats, I'm just getting my VO2 max precise value, and then for miles, I'm getting the distance of my last run, and then this is in meters, so I'm dividing it by 1609 to convert it to miles. And then effect, I'm getting my last activity and getting the training effect label, and then yeah, getting the duration as well, and just rounding these two so that only two numbers show up after the decimal point. Cool. So yeah, let's see if that worked. Just printing this stuff out. Guess we can delete this now. Cool. So yeah, this is the stuff that I wanted to access: my VO2 max, my mileage for my run yesterday, aerobic base, and the duration of my run. Cool. So yeah, now let's move on. I also want to access my records. So that is a little bit more confusing. But to sort of help you guys see what this is, so Garmin stores a lot of records, and just the way that it works with this data is a little bit confusing, so let's print it. And this code is going to be linked below if you aren't interested in this, but I'll just go through it really quickly. So these are all the records. So it's a list of 11 dictionaries. You can see the length here, 11. And some of them have meaningful records and some of them don't. So you can see this first one, it has activity name none, activity type none, and it doesn't really have any value 0. So I think Garmin has these 11 records from cycling and swimming, and I just haven't used Garmin for cycling or swimming yet, so I don't have any records stored there. I also haven't run a marathon, so I don't have any marathon records stored. So there is a few of these that just don't have any value or any meaningful data to me. So in order to get rid of the stuff in this that does not have meaningful data to me, I'm just going to use this for loop to loop through the records and remove anything that doesn't have an activity type. And then after I do that, I want to get this value. So you can see this value is associated with number of seconds that it took me to complete, or my PR seconds. So I want to just do some basic Python math to convert these seconds values, which record of values in seconds, and then I'm just converting it into minutes and seconds to make it just like easier to read. In order to do that and just store it more easily, I'm creating this empty list and then pushing time strings into it. And so this if else too, I'm just dealing with, so if it took me less than 60 minutes, then I'm just going to have minutes and seconds, and then if it took me more than an hour, I'm going to have hours, minutes, and seconds. So that's all that this is doing. But yeah, let's look at that. I think I deleted everything else. Cool. So yeah, these are all of my records. This is my 1K record, mile record, 5K, 10K, half marathon. And if we look in the Garmin Connect database, this matches up exactly. Cool. So then there's probably a more efficient way to do this, but this is just the way that I thought of first. So I am just making variables and yeah, taking these first 5 values in my records list, and then I am making a string with all of them, and we can just see what this is doing. Oops, run it again. I typed something wrong. Okay, cool. So we can see this is all of my records, and that's what this formatting is, just the new line. But yeah, cool. So now we have we are accessing all the data that I want to from Garmin. So let's get started actually pushing this to Notion. So to do that, we're going to want to install the Notion client library. So run that first, and then you will have from Notion client, import client. Okay, nice. And let's start putting this stuff into functions. Just better practice. So everything so far that we've written is going to be in our main function. And then if main equals main. Okay, cool. So now that we have that, I'm going to create some variables, page ID, database ID, and Notion token. And this is data that I'm going to get from Notion and Notion API, but it's basically just going to tell our code which page that we want to push data into, which database that we want to push data into, and which Notion workspace we're working with. So I will move over to Notion and Notion API to get this data and put it in the code. First, we're going to get our Notion token. So to do that, I just Googled Notion API. It's the first thing that comes up. And then you'll go to this page, and then go to My Integrations. Cool. So this is the integration for the page that I showed you earlier. But let's make a new integration for this. So let's call it Garmin Demo. Cool. And then you can check the capabilities here. Make sure we can read, update, insert content, no user information. Cool. So you could make changes there, but we don't need to. So this internal integration key, this is our Notion token. So I'm going to copy that and move it over to VS Code. And then, yeah, then we can head back to Notion. So this is just my dashboard. But let's create a new page, call it Garmin Demo, and then make a database, an inline database on this page. Yeah, so we're going to be putting data from Garmin into this database. And so to do that, we need the page ID. So to get the page ID, I just copied the link there. Let's paste it into this browser so that we can get what we need from it. So everything after this, like page name dash, up until this question mark, you want to grab that, and that is our page ID. So I'm going to move that over into our code just as a string, and then go back to Garmin. So there will also be something like that for the database. So I copied the link for the database, pasting it into the browser, and again, on this one, it's everything after notion.so/ up until this first question mark. That is going to be our database ID. So just putting that in our code as a string, and then back here, one last thing, we just need to make sure that the page is connected to our integration. So go to add connections and then find whatever you named yours, my Garmin Demo, confirm. Alright, cool, so now we're ready to get back into coding. So back in the code, the only thing that I changed is adding in these page ID, database ID, and Notion token into our main function as variables. So now we can use this client. We can create a Notion client based on that secret key. So client equals client, auth equals Notion token. Cool. So now that we have a client, we can create a function that I'm going to call write text. And in order to figure out how to do this, I very closely followed this tutorial by IndieDevDan. So definitely check that out. If you have questions, he'll do a better job explaining it than me. But basically, we are just making this function to write text based on the client. So that is like my Notion workspace, and then the page ID, that's the page we want to write text to. And then this is the actual content, and then type, so like call out H1, H2, H3. So basically we are just appending a new block at the end of that page, this page ID with the type that we input, and then the content is just going to be the text that we input into this function. So cool, let's see if that works. I'll just grab this and put it into our main function. Write text client page ID. Oh, did I call it something different? Page ID, yeah. And then text. And then type, let's just do call out. Cool. So I'll save that and run it. Okay, cool. So we can see that that worked. We can see a call out at the bottom of the page with the expected text inside. So that's pretty cool. Now we can move on to the database. So we can edit each of these columns to be the properties that we want to store in this database. So I'm just going to rename that to effect. This can be VO2 max, and edit property, change that to a number. Cool. Let's add another one called miles. Make it a number as well. Add another property called duration, which is also a number. And then we also want date. But make sure that it's lowercase for our code. Cool. Okay, so now I'm just going to drag these, make them all smaller, make it fit better, so we don't have to scroll. Okay, Cool, so now that we have that, we can head back over to the code and start pushing some variables into this database. So now that we have this write text function working, we're going to want to make another function. I'll call it write row to write rows to the database. So this function is also heavily based off of Indie Dev Dan's 5-minute Notion API tutorials, so definitely check those out. Very helpful for beginners to Notion API like myself. But yeah, so this function takes arguments of client, database ID, and then these are the properties that I want to push to the database. So client to know which workspace we're working with, and then knowing which database, and then all these properties. So we're basically just creating a new page in the database, telling it to go to this specified database, and then adding all these properties. And this syntax with all of these brackets can be a little bit confusing, but I think it will make more sense once we get to the charts and rows part of this. You can see how the Notion API sort of stores properties in weird trees. But yeah, cool. So now that we have that, we can call this in our main function to see if it works. So this should be dbid, and then date we can use today, and then yeah, everything else we have. Okay, cool. So I'll save that and run it. Okay, so we can see that it worked. It pushed this data into our database, our VO2 max 49, 4.64 miles, and the duration and the date. Cool, so now I want to just start populating this with some fake data just to help us visualize stuff in charts better. So I guess we can just kind of mirror my real workouts a little bit, and just, yeah, I'll call this VO2 max 49 with like 5.1 miles duration. It was a little bit longer, so let's just say 3,000 seconds with a date of yesterday. Cool, and then we'll do another, or let's just do a tempo. Say my VO2 max didn't change, because it probably didn't over 3 days. Let's go with 9 miles, 9.2 miles, duration of 9,000 seconds, and we'll say the date on that was the 27th, and we can just delete this row. Cool. So now we have some fake data, and we can start working with this in rows to get it in a chart. Googled rows software, and this is the first one that comes up. So you can just click on that. It'll have you create a free account, but I already created it, and I already made a spreadsheet for that demo I showed at the beginning. So let's create a new spreadsheet. This should be what you see when you first log into your free account. But yeah, so let's get started. Endpoint. This is going to be the URL for our API call. HTTPS api.notion.com/v1/databases/ and then B2, I'm going to put my database ID there, and then query. So yeah, let's make this bigger. Database ID, then I'll just copy that from the code, the database ID, and then here we have secret token. So also copy that from the code. That's our Notion token variable that we've been using to get access to our Notion workspace. Cool, and then authorization is going to be concatenate of bearer, and then our secret token. Yeah, cool. And then here it needs our Notion version. So for me that is 2022-06-28. just the most recent Notion release, which you can just Google, or look at the Notion API site. So now, pair to JSON of A4, B4, A5, B5. And now we're ready to make our API call. Equals post of B1, B6, and then create an empty object for the body. Cool, so it looks like that worked. Let's inspect the data, look at the results, properties, and there we can see our duration, VO2 max, miles, date, effect. Cool, so just to simplify that a little bit, let's make a results where we parse the API call by results. Okay, cool. So if we inspect that data, it should be a little bit cleaner, and it looks like it is, but we still got our properties. Okay, cool. So now let's create a data table, build a table with all data, and then edit the data so we can get rid of all this stuff. And let's add properties, not all the properties. Within properties, so if you see these drop downs, it is kind of reminiscent of the code that we used before to push stuff into the database. You can see these numbers are like fairly simple. They're just nested like one below what the actual property is. Same with miles, but data is going to be a little bit more complex. Like this date also has a drop down for like start end time zone. I mean, we only care about start. But effect also, because it's the title, has some weird stuff, and because of text. So we really just want the content. But yeah, you can see how these trees, like, they're not nested the same, which is why we have to like change the format when we are posting data into the database in our Python code. So yeah, cool. Let's sort this a little bit. So duration, we can change these names. I'm not going to do it to all of them just for time. But yeah, so we have our date, our miles, our VO2 max, duration, and effect. Cool. So now we can create a chart out of some of this data. So the first set of data I just want to be our miles and VO2 max for each day. That's what I have before. So main axis is going to be start, and then VO2 max and miles. Cool. So that should give us this chart that we see down here. And we can change the color, make this purple and pink. Cool. So we have this, and I guess first we can embed this. So share it privately, copy this link, and then go back to our Notion demo /embed, and then just paste that link in. And we can see our chart there. I'll move it up to the top. Cool, and let's go back. And so yeah, to make the pie chart, I made a new table. So for this, I just have the effect and the duration, VO2 max, and so this is actually going to end up being the sum, so it's not just like each individual data point, but you'll see what I mean. Tempo, recovery, aerobic, base. Okay, cool. So then we're going to use this SUMIF function. So the range we're looking at is these titles. If any of those titles are equal to this title, then I want to sum its value in duration. So yeah, let's just get rid of that last number so that it goes all the way to the end once we add more stuff. Cool. So this is just, if we had multiple workouts that were VO2 max, it would sum the duration for all of those. So, but since we only have one, it's not really doing much right now, but it will when there's more stuff in the database. Cool. And so I'm just changing this to A3, A4, A5 as I'm going down. Nice. And then now we can insert our pie chart. So we'll select this data. Cool. And group data by rows. And now we can see that's kind of closer to what we want. Yeah, let's make this blue. Looks a little bit better. Okay, cool. So yeah, we can just do the same thing here. Get an embed link. And yeah, just do it at the bottom again. Embed. Cool, so you can see that there. And then if we want it at the top, like I had it in my other dashboard, we can do this, full width, so there's a little more room. And then we can adjust this. Give this a little bit more room. I just don't want there to be the scroll bar. Okay, cool. Just a little less room. But cool, so you can see what I mean. So we have our pie chart here of the different effects of our training, and then our VO2 max and mileage, and we're getting this data from Garmin Connect, so that's pretty cool. One thing I did want to mention here is that when you push new data into the database, it's not going to automatically refresh here. You have to run this API call again, or you can add another thing that I found here. You can add a schedule. So just set it to automatically refresh so I'm going to refresh the API call every 24 hours. So yeah, hopefully like every time you run, it will refresh every 24 hours, and you can change this time length. I think in the free version you can only do it by hours, but in the paid version by minutes as well. But you could make it refresh every hour if you wanted to. Cool. So yeah, that is how I built this Garmin database. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you'd like to see from me in the future. Thanks. Feel free to leave a like if you feel like you got something useful out of this video, and let me know what kinds of stuff you'd be interested in seeing from me next. My goal with this channel is really to just become a better teacher. I'm a mechanical engineer professionally, but I also really enjoy doing fun software side projects like this, and just building cool things that I'm proud of. So yeah, let me know, and thanks for watching. Bye.